Welcome back from hiatus! During our 2 weeks off, I had the time to finally read a couple of sequels to two of my favorite books. So today I'm going to share with you quick reviews of both those books that I read during the break. First up, I was lucky to get a digital arc of Shadow Scale by Rachel Hartman, which is the sequel to Serafina. There were two things that made me really love Serafina. First up were all of the amazing characters. I just fell in love with almost all of the characters other than maybe the villains. Those are probably the only characters I wasn't in love with. And I also fell in love with the world that Rachel Hartman built. I've read a lot of fantasy, it's my favorite genre, and this was unlike any other fantasy world that I have read before. Without spoiling too much, it's basically about a world where dragons can take on human form, and after many years of war and a lot of problems between the two races, humans and dragons are now trying to live side by side, but there's some problems. In the first book, Serafina, we were introduced to this growing conflict between the humans and the dragons, all through the eyes of our main character, named Serafina, who is a musician in the palace and is also keeping some really big secrets about herself that are growing harder and harder to keep quiet about. When the first book ended, we were left with a lot of questions about what was going to happen to all of our favorite characters and how this war that was starting was going to resolve. And Shadow Scale does a wonderful job of resolving all these things. I loved this book. In Serafina, the entire story takes place in Serafina's hometown, which is the capital of Gored. In Shadow Scale, we get to see Rachel Hartman's world completely expanded as Serafina travels looking for people who are similar to her. Still don't want to give out too many spoilers for the first book for people who haven't read it, but she has some people she has to find, and she gets to travel the world to find them, and we get to travel with her. All of my favorite characters were back, plus some new characters that I love just as much as the old ones. Our old villains are still there, we get new villains. Shadow Scale is actually the end of the series. There's only 2 books, and it wrapped up the story really well. The conflict ended just how I would like it to. It was the perfect balance of loss and victory. All of the characters' stories were wrapped up nicely. I only have one complaint about this book, and it's just how the romance ended. There's nothing really wrong with it, and Rachel Hartman took a really interesting turn on the romance that I have not seen in any other book, which was cool. I did love all of the romantic scenes. Rachel Hartman is really good at writing that sense of longing in romance. And there was a really cool twist in the sort of love triangle towards the end of the book, which I was not expecting and I really loved. But just the way that the romance ended up isn't quite how I would have done it, and beyond just the way it was done, I didn't feel like I had as much resolution as I wanted for that particular storyline. I wanted just a little bit more because I'm kind of a sucker for romance in my fantasy novels. But overall, this book is 5 stars for me. I loved it. It wrapped up the story so beautifully. It's well written. The world is gorgeous. The characters are complex, and the characters are wonderfully diverse. You get characters of different ethnicities, skin tones, abilities, sexualities, everything. It's wonderful. Anyway, just check it out. I can't talk about this series enough. If you haven't read Serafina, start the series from the beginning. If you have read Serafina, make sure you pick up Shadow Scale because I think you will love the ending. And the other sequel that I just finished like 10 minutes ago, right before I started recording this, is Firefight by Brandon Sanderson. That might be kind of shiny because it's a library cover. I apologize if it is. I mentioned in our live chat Sunday that this is what I was currently reading. I got home from work tonight and just really wanted to finish it, so I flew through the last 100 pages before I started recording this. And wow, what an amazing last 100 pages this book has. I was kind of shocked how much I loved the end of this one. Firefight is the sequel to Steelheart, which came out a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. It's been a little while. This series is a little bit sci-fi, a little bit dystopian, a little bit superheroes. Basic premise is in the future, a cataclysmic event happens, a new star appears in the sky, and people start getting superpowers. Only problem is none of these people become superheroes, they all become supervillains. First book, Steelheart, begins with our main character David, who as a child saw his father killed by one of the greatest epics, which is our name for these supervillains, who has ever lived, called Steelheart. David has been out for vengeance his whole life and dreams of joining the Reckoners, which is a secret group of rebels who are out to kill the epics. When Firefight begins, David is still kind of reeling from the aftermath of finally killing his father's murderer and figuring out what he is going to do with his life from this point and what he's going to do with the Reckoners. Firefight takes us to Babylon Restored, which is the new name for Manhattan, where there is an epic in control of the city who has started causing some problems, and David and some of his teammates are out to figure out what's going on. Something I loved in Steelheart was some of the crazy reveals that happened at the end of this book, and you get some of those in this one too. It had some stuff that was really cool that I didn't see coming. Something that's really cool about this series is that while it's got lots of action and superpowers, it also deals a lot with human nature and understanding how people work and about fear and all sorts of cool, deep things, which is always fun to have in a book. I don't know, I'm kind of having trouble collecting my thoughts since I just finished this book, so maybe this part of this video won't make any sense. But basically, I really like this book. It's probably about 4.5 stars for me. I liked that we got to see more of this dystopian world, we got to see more of these epics, we got to learn more, we got some cool reveals, the romance was developed a little bit better than it was in the first one, the characters got great development, the story moved forward in some big ways. I'm just really excited to find out what is going to happen in the third book, Calamity. Hopefully it won't take too long to come out. Anyway, this is another great series to check out if you haven't already, or to keep reading if you haven't gotten to this one yet. I love a sequel that can expand the world and develop the characters and bring in new characters, all while staying true to the spirit of the first book and the things that made you fall in love with the story. And both these books, Firefight and Shadowscale, did that for me. Anyway, let me know in the comments if you have read either of these or if they're on your TBR list because you've read the first books. And speaking of books, keep an eye out for our live chat this Sunday at 7:30 Eastern Time. We're doing kind of a informal book club because it's not the end of the month yet, but we're going to be talking about The Fifth Wave, which I need to go buy tomorrow and read before Sunday because I haven't read it yet. If you haven't read it, you can binge read it along with me this week. If you have read it, then perfect, you are ready for this Sunday. There, we'd love to talk to you about this book because we love talking books. Anyway, see you guys Sunday. Bye.